Hello and welcome to Hamer Reviews. My name is Christopher Hamer and today we're reviewing the Tesla Powerwall 2. Excuse any background noise, we're outside, so nature, car noises and sirens all will probably happen, but hopefully you won't mind too much. Now, the Tesla Powerwall 2 is a really interesting proposition from Tesla. It's 13.5 kilowatt hours of battery, which you can attach to your home to provide power when there isn't any, or to save power from a solar system, or indeed simply to give yourself a break from power cuts if that's what you're affected by. We're not affected by those, but we decided to go a little bit more green. We put in place an air source heat pump, we added solar panels, and so the Tesla Powerwall made sense. There are other home battery packs available, but I think the Powerwall is probably the most well known, and it's also, in my opinion, the easiest to use. And when I say the easiest to use, I mean literally, once it is installed, there is very little input required from the user at all. But let's drill into what the Tesla Powerwall 2 is. It's a battery pack which uses, I think it's a form of lithium manganate batteries, not 100% sure, but don't quote me on it. And it provides 13.5 kilowatt hours of power. That is double the initial Tesla Powerwall that launched in 2015, and I think it's a much better number in terms of actually powering a home. 13.5 kilowatts sounds like a lot, but it won't actually go as far as you think. An immersion heater might use 3 kilowatt hours. An oven will probably use 3 to 4 kilowatt hours. If you have an older washing machine or a tumble dryer, they will use quite a lot of power as well. You will quickly get through 13.5 kilowatts if you try. That being said, if you have a solar system, then that's something you don't necessarily need to worry about, but more on that later. The actual Powerwall unit consists of two parts. You have the actual battery, which can be mounted outside or inside. In our case, it's outside, though it's partially protected from a canopy, but it doesn't have to be. And then you have a gateway, which we're going to look at a little later as well. In terms of the actual Powerwall, I think it looks quite good, to be honest with you. You have this rather nice white design. You just have the brand over the top, and then you have the required stickers on top telling you danger and not to touch it. We also have an isolator here where if we switch that off, the battery disconnects from the house in case anyone needs to do some work to our electricity system. In terms of buttons, functionality, etc., you have an on-off switch, and that is literally it. Obviously you also have the battery isolator, but that's separate, and there's nothing much else you can do. It's all self-contained, and I think that's why the battery is as interesting as it is. You have a green strip of LEDs which runs down the side, and you really see that at night, but everything else is managed by Tesla, the entire process and system. You get the Tesla app, which is the same one that you can use to monitor your Tesla vehicle, and that is about it. It is impressive because of how unimpressive it is. I think that quite often you are required to think about, am I discharging and charging it correctly? Am I conditioning the battery? There's none of that conversation that you need to have because the entire process is out of your hands. For some people that might be a bad thing, but in my opinion, I think that simplicity is almost channeling what Apple did so well with the launch of the iPod. Removing choice can sometimes have a very positive result. Another thing I like about the Tesla Powerwall is how unobtrusive it looks. I honestly think that this design can fit into the background quite nicely and you wouldn't notice it. Another positive is you can actually mount them up to 3 deep, so you can mount them in front of each other. Or of course you can mount them side by side, and you can add, I believe, up to 9 of them. Now if you have 9 of these, that's going to set you back quite a lot, because the actual battery costs between £6,000 and £7,000, and then you have to pay another £1,000 to £2,000 for installation. The costs will mount up fast. Whether you get that back or not will probably depend on how you're using it. And let's have a look at that now. Now there are actually various different ways of using a Powerwall. The first is for backup power. In that use case, you have charged it from grid electricity and you're waiting for the power to fail, and once it does, it kicks in and powers your home. The second use case is to save yourself money. Now, that would be charging it from cheap night electricity and then using it during the peak time when you would actually be paying a lot more for power. The most common though is to use it alongside a solar power array, such as we have. In this case, we have a 4 kilowatt hour system. It's by no means the biggest, but it's more than enough power for us to power both our home and charge the Powerwall at the same time. There is a slight caveat to that though. If it's winter time, we actually produce much less electricity because, being in London, the sun just doesn't shine very much during the winter and autumn. And in those cases, we'll actually augment it with the grid system that I mentioned before. We charge it overnight, which then powers our home once we start using power. And we can use that cheap night electricity during the day. And then if there is some solar power, it will top up the battery a little bit, but it doesn't really bring it to 100%, so it doesn't really matter. It's certainly a great way of saving money, and it's a more efficient way of using your solar power system. In the UK, feed-in tariffs ended, I believe it was last year. So if you install a new solar power panel system like we did, you'll actually find there's no money that you'd get for feeding electricity into the grid. Thus, using a Tesla Powerwall is an efficient way of saving that electricity that otherwise you're simply giving away for free. That brings us on to the final part of this review, the Tesla Gateway. Now, once again, it's an unassuming white rectangle, and if I open it up, you have only slightly more control than the single button on the Powerwall itself. You have a reset switch with a status light and some breakers. That's literally it. You also have a service access panel. However, that can only be used if instructed to do so by Tesla. In terms of connections, obviously it's connected to your power system, but it also requires an internet connection. You can do that through Wi-Fi or indeed wireless LAN, or it has a built-in SIM card so you can use cellular networks as well. The thing is that any type of changes that you can make to this can only happen through the app. You can see the ongoing status from the Tesla app of how much capacity your Powerwall battery pack has. You can also see how much solar power you've generated, how much power the house has used in total, how much you've used from the grid, how much you've used from the battery, and it will give you a live graph of where your power is coming from and what your usage is. This is really useful if you want to understand how much power a given appliance is using, because it's in real time, so you can switch that appliance on, watch the number change on your Tesla app, and you have a rough idea of how much power that device is consuming. The Tesla app also gives you access to some of the features such as changing the setting of the Powerwall. So for instance, if you want it in backup mode, whether you want it in balanced mode, whether you want it to charge off the grid overnight, etc. Though again, only with very simple menu choices. And also whether you want to use features such as Stormwatch. Stormwatch is a very cool system that Tesla has put in place. It warns you when an impeding event is about to take place, such as a major storm that's expected to cause serious damage, or for instance, it was used in the wildfires in Australia and California, and it will charge your Powerwall to 100% off the grid as quickly as possible and maintain it there until that event is over, thus ensuring you have as much power capacity available as required during that event. The Powerwall really is that simple. You have very little choices, but as a result, you can't actually make many mistakes. You can't actually break it as a user, which I think is a good thing. It's self-contained, it doesn't take up a massive amount of space, whether that's the gateway or indeed the Powerwall itself, and overall it is very simple to use. If you are looking at home power generation, it's seriously worth considering one. And although officially it only works with solar power at the moment, there have been people that have hacked it to work with wind power as well. Now, I don't recommend that, and it's certainly not something we'll do here. However, if that's something that is the only choice that you have, perhaps it's worth looking into. I hope you found this review useful about the Tesla Powerwall 2. If you have any questions or are a fellow user, pop them in the comments below. It'd be interesting to hear your thoughts on the Powerwall. Equally, give this video a thumbs up if you enjoyed it. The other button works too. And please do subscribe if you haven't already. It really does help. Thank you very much for watching, and I hope to see you again next time. Goodbye.